and thanks for listening to All Kinds of Minds, a podcast dedicated to celebrating neurodiversity in our world. My name is James Valletti, and I volunteer with Welcome Neurodiversity as their head of podcast. On today's episode, I have the great privilege of talking with my friend and former colleague, Evan Rosenblum, whose voice and face you may recognize from nearly 20 years on TMZ and TMZ Sports. Professionally, he's moved on to consulting for a myriad of sports-related media and entertainment projects. He's launched endeavors with UFC, Fox Sports, and many of the world's most popular athletes. I've been in awe of Evan since we first met nearly 12 years ago, and some of the things that I admire most about him are what a great parent he's become and what a great advocate he and his wife have become for neurodiversity. Evan and his wife Samantha have 2 children. Their daughter, Sydney, is 9 years old and was diagnosed with cerebral palsy and bilateral PVL, which is a type of brain damage that affects both sides of her brain. Evan and Samantha work tirelessly to provide the happiest and healthiest life for Sydney, their daughter, and the rest of the neurodiverse community. They document a lot of their day-to-day lives through the videos and photos on Sydney's Instagram. You can follow Sydney on Instagram at smiling_Sydney_strong and Evan at EV Rosenblum. Evan and I recently had the chance to speak at length for All Kinds of Minds, and we are thrilled to share that episode with you today. Hey, Evan, welcome to the All Kinds of Minds podcast for Welcome Neurodiversity. How's it going today?
It's going great. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Of course, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. So let's jump right in. Can you tell us a little bit about Sydney and her journey with CP, what she's like, what it was like for you to get the diagnosis? Start from the beginning.
Absolutely. So first off, Sydney is the best. Just want everybody to know that. She is the most adorable, amazing, smart, charismatic, funny kid in the whole entire world. She's 9 years old now. She was born in 2015, and the way that she entered the world was insane. My wife was 25 weeks pregnant, and she felt uncomfortable, so we went to the hospital, Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles. Just to be safe, we didn't know anything was crazy. She was like, it doesn't feel right. Let's just go to the doctor to check. So we go to the hospital. I'm like, all of a sudden the doctors are like, your wife's blood pressure is insanely high. We need to do more tests. And when I tell you that it snowballed very quickly, I mean, very, very quickly. It was like test. They passes. Everybody it kept looking at the results of the test and was like, oh my God. And you could see it in the doctors and the nurses. Everybody's trying to keep a straight face, but it was a bad poker face. You can tell something was very wrong. And, in a matter of minutes, really, they went from, everything's going to be okay, to like, hey, this is a very, very serious situation. Her life is in danger. Your unborn baby, her life is in danger. We need to get you into a hospital room like right now. Turns out my wife was experiencing severe preeclampsia, which is basically when it's like your body's going into organ failure. And so they said that we needed to do everything we could to try and stabilize the baby and perform an emergency C-section as soon as possible. So they gave Sam medicine, my wife Sam, they gave her medicine to try and stabilize her and the baby. And the day before she was born, we were in the hospital, and all the doctors, all the neonatologists, everybody came in there and was telling us the chances of survival and explaining all the stuff to us that we were not prepared to process at the moment. Everything from, the survival rate at that point is low, 25 weeker, born, and with a traumatic birth like that, it's not great. The odds aren't great. And somebody sat us down at one point and they said, so here's what's going to happen. When we do the C-section, we're going to look for something called viable signs of life with your daughter. And if we see viable signs of life, then we're going to work like hell to try and save her and do everything. But there is a chance that if she comes out and there are no viable signs of life, that we're going to go into comfort care mode and we're going to help her transition, essentially. And so Sam and I are like, holy shit, excuse my French. One doctor pulled me aside and basically said, and by the way, my wife is like all very seriously ill at this point. Somebody pulled me aside, one of the doctors, and said, there's a realistic chance your wife could pass, and so with your daughter. So if you have any support systems here in town, call someone. So I was like, oh my God, you can imagine my body went numb. So fast forward the next day, first thing in the morning, they grab Sam, they put me in the scrubs. We go to the emergency room, the entire NICU's there, everybody's there. They start the C-section. And as soon as they pull Sydney out, I heard a yelp and I saw a hand go like this. And I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, viable signs of life, like save her, like viable signs of life. And they did. And the neonatology team at Cedars-Sinai was incredible, and they went to work and they saved her life, and Sydney was born, And Sam was she was okay. She was in intensive care in the hospital for the next 2 weeks. We ended up spending 143 days in the NICU at Cedars while she was there. We saw it all, man. She had multiple surgeries. She had an open flap in her heart, and they had to close that. The worst part, and we can get into this a little later too, but after a couple of weeks, when Sydney seemed stable in the hospital, my daughter's name is Sydney, I went back to work, and I got a call like my second or third day back to work from the hospital from a neonatologist saying, hey, we believe Sydney is showing signs of something called NEC, necrotizing enterocolitis. What that means is it's an infection of her intestine. And unfortunately, most infants in the hospital that get NEC pass away within hours. It's a very fast-moving, deadly thing. And so when they called me, I jumped right in my car and I sped to work and got there. And by the time they got there, they had cleared the entire NICU out, and they had a surgeon, and he performed an operation where he opened up Sydney. She was only just 6 weeks of life at this point. And they performed a procedure on her where they removed all the infected intestine, which was a third of her intestine. And at that point, rewind a second. So before they performed the surgery, sorry, I'm just getting it's emotional when you run this stuff back again.
Of course.
They told Sam and I that they weren't confident that Sydney was going to survive the procedure. So we had to prepare ourselves for that yet again. We had 6 weeks where we got to know her. We're like, oh my God, this is going great. And then all of a sudden, boom, everything changed in a heartbeat. They told us that they didn't know if she was going to survive or not. The doctor performed the surgery. Thankfully, she did survive. Unfortunately, it appeared that her 6-week-old body, which was only 31 gestational weeks at the time, wasn't prepared to handle a procedure that intense. And unfortunately, she suffered a traumatic brain injury during that procedure. After a while, she was at her 143 days, she was discharged from the hospital, and we took her home, but it became clear later on that something was off. And ultimately, she was diagnosed with cerebral palsy and something called bilateral PVL. Bilateral PVL is essentially brain damage on both sides of the brain. I'm not trying to be insensitive, but one doctor described it to me as it looks like somebody there was a shotgun blast to both sides of her brain. So like Swiss cheese holes in both sides of her brain. And I'm sitting here going, like, how does somebody survive like that? And what they explained to me was, when you are dealing with a child that's that young, their brains are malleable, and the neurological pathways can reroute. So figure if you're on a freeway and you're trying to get from point A to point B, and somebody rips off part of the freeway so you can't go in a straight shot, your brain will actually figure out a way to go veer off and find an alternative route to get to point B. And not all of the neurological pathways repair like that, but enough did that Sydney, we didn't know how she was going to turn out. We didn't know what she was going to be able to do and not do and stuff like that. But fortunately for us, she's very smart. She's very expressive. She's very friendly. She's very social. She's nonverbal and non-ambulatory, which means that she can't express words through typical speech. And non-ambulatory meaning that she doesn't have full use of all of her extremities. She can't walk. So she's in a wheelchair. As far as communication goes, she uses a device to communicate, which she's picked up over the years and she's great at. I can't wait to get into that a little later. But essentially that's the story of Sydney.
Wow, that is an extremely difficult thing to go through. I can't even imagine what that first year must have been like for you as a parent and all of the questions that kind of come out of that. So thanks for sharing that. How would you describe her today? What are some of her favorite things? I want to learn more about her.
Yeah, she's an amazing kid. She loves being social. One of her favorite things to do is be with her friends and hanging out at school. We are very, very lucky that we got into, it's a charter school out here in Los Angeles, which means it's a little different than your typical school. It's still funded by the Los Angeles Unified School District, so it's free, but they just have a wait list, and we applied and we got in. And they specialize in dealing with kids that are different, that have disabilities. And when we were able to get in there, it changed our world. They have staff there that speaks Sydney's language. So her language is a system called PODD, P-O-D-D. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head what that stands for, but basically it's a series of images, and Sydney scans through the images and selects what she wants to say and ultimately puts a message together, and then she can hit the button and speak her message out loud.
That's incredible.
It's incredible.
So that brings up a question, is reading a part of that? Does she understands how to read. So when she's looking at the screen at the pod system, she can say, this is, I feel happy. I feel sad. I need to use the
Yes.
bathroom.
I'll send you videos because it'll help kind of explain. But essentially, it's, she's got a screen, and then she has a switch, two switches. Just look like this. All right.
No,
It looks like this. It's a button, right? And you can press the button, and one button will navigate the different symbols and words, and the other button is like the enter button. So she'll scan, and when she lands on something, she'll click it in. Boom.
I saw a video of you guys doing Tiki Room.
Can you play Tiki Room video for Daddy?
Miley Cyrus, Flowers.
No.
Shakira, Hips Don't Lie. Tiki Room.
Yes, Sidney, that's amazing. Great job, Sid. Thank you for playing my favorite song.
And I do want to say that the woman who turned us on the pod, who is one of the most amazing people in our lives, and somebody that you should contact if you know anybody, especially with cerebral palsy, nonverbal, her name is Allie Steers, and she operates out of Agora, California, and she is amazing.
Awesome.
She works with tons of kids just like Sydney. We've met so many people through her. She has helped us to get to know Sydney and open up communication with Sydney in ways that I never thought possible. And I'm telling you, she is one of the most important people in our lives, and she's changed our lives, and she's incredible, and I can't sing her praises enough.
That's incredible to hear that. And I can imagine what that's like to, in the beginning of someone's, your child's life, to wonder, how will we learn how to communicate? So it's great to hear. Do you have any specific examples of how Sydney and you and Sam's communication, what that's like, how that's evolved over time? Do you use the pod machine primarily to communicate?
So she understands almost everything, right? Like, she understands a lot. So, and she's always listening. So we'll talk to her. Like, I won't speak to her in pod, but she'll respond to me in pod. So I'll talk to her, same way I would talk to you. Like, hey, Sydney, do you want to go to Starbucks today? Starbucks is her favorite place in the world.
What does she order?
She loves the banana walnut bread. It's her favorite thing. It's her favorite thing on earth.
Awesome.
So I'll say, hey, Sydney, do you want to go to Starbucks? And she'll say, "See," because she can actually she can speak the word "see." So she can say "see" for yes, and then she has the ability to shake her head no like this for no. That's one of the things that Allie taught us at the beginning. Was like one of the most important things for these kids. Are you have to figure out their yes and their no. And it's different for everybody. It's based on their ability, what they can actually do. And so Sydney was able to vocalize the word "see." So we're like, "See, yes, great. That's your yes." So she'll say "see," and it's the most adorable thing. And then if she doesn't want something, she'll shake her head no, and she's really good at that. So we'll talk to her. And then if she has something to say back to us, it's a little more complex. She'll use the pod device. We also have a low-tech book that we can scan through as well. And so if we don't have the device on us at the moment, we always have the book on her chair. So she always has a way to communicate.
Awesome. And you have another child as well, a son, right?
Yeah. My son, Bennett. Yeah. He's 6 years old.
Awesome.
And fortunately for us, I mean, the two of them get along great. We didn't realize the dynamic at the time that we decided to expand our family and have Bennett. Because when we had Sydney, there are a lot of people who have kids with severe disabilities who decide, you know what, this is going to be too hard. This is just the one for us, and that's cool. And, every family's different. You got to make your choices. For us, we wanted a larger family, and we made the decision, even though we knew how difficult the challenges that were going to come with Sydney. We decided to have another kid. We had Bennett, and the dynamic of being a younger sibling to someone who requires so much assistance, there's a whole dynamic there. It's like younger sibling of
that's what I wanted to ask. What is the dynamic like between them?
Yeah. So one of the things I didn't realize until, it took me a while for my eyes to open was when Bennett was like starting to learn how to potty train and starting to learn how to like feed him, things like that. Right. He would always say like, wait, you guys feed Sydney. Like, why do I have to feed myself? You guys change Sydney. Why do I have to be potty trained? You guys do all these things for her. Like, why do I have to do that stuff? Like, because if you think about a typical older sibling, younger sibling relationship, like the younger sibling usually tries to copy and be like the older sibling, right? Yeah. And so in our situation, Sydney, has all this assistance all the time, and I think Bennett thought, oh, well, this is just the way, right? Like I'm going to get this too. It's going to be fine. And we had to explain to him like, no, man, you You have to learn to go to the bathroom on your own. You have to get dressed on your own. You have to feed yourself. He's like, well, that's not fair. And then trying to explain cerebral palsy to a little kid is challenging. So you have to do it in a way where, like, he's 6 now, he'll be 7 in a few months. And I think now he's kind of processing and understanding, starting to figure it out. So the dynamics are changing, but he also knows that, like, the way our family works is Sydney needs help sometimes. And we make, that means sometimes Bennett, you have to help her. I have to help her. Sam has to help her. Everybody has to help. But sometimes, you have to help too. They fight like typical brother-sister. They love each other like typical brother-sister. It's a really, really great relationship. And it's perfect for us.
I have a question, and I'm not sure if I'm asking it the right way or, there's, this is all kind of new and I'm learning through all this as well.
Fire away.
Is there, Sydney, intellectually and kind of emotionally, is there sort of a threshold on how much she can process? Like, will she be able to, when she's 35, will she be processing things like a 35-year-old? Is that TBD? What do the medical experts say?
We don't know, is the short answer. I know that she's really smart, and the examples that I'll give you are, she can put together some pretty complex messages on her device. She has very strong preferences on what she likes and doesn't like. She really does process a lot. Now, will she be doing algebra and calculus? Right. No, I'm not. I don't want to paint everybody with cerebral palsy with this brush, because every case is different. Sydney's more on the severe end, and she has a severe brain damage component also. Yeah. So for Sydney, I don't want to take anything off the table ever. Like, anything's possible with her. She's blown us away time and time again. But I also think that, like, being realistic about it, our priorities for her are not to teach her things right now, not to teach her things like advanced mathematics and stuff like that. We're trying to prepare her with all the life skills that she'll need, and also socialization, because socialization is so important for her. She, unfortunately for Sydney, like, she's probably not going to have a typical job working at an office or something like that. Sydney's more on the severe extreme end. And so we're trying to, when we're talking about education for her, we want her to be able to maintain relationships, conversations, engage with people, but she loves listening to music and watching movies and television, and she'll read books and stuff like that. And so we're loading her up with that kind of stuff, and then whatever she shows interest in, we'll lean into that too.
That's great. Thanks for talking me through that and helping me understand, because it's something I'm learning as well. So what are the biggest challenges that you and Sam have faced as parents of a child who's nonverbal?
Yeah. So there are, how much time we got? No, I was kidding. There's a lot. I wish I could tell the audience that this is, it works itself out and it becomes easy, but the reality of it is it doesn't. With a kid like Sydney, there are challenges across the spectrum. We're talking financial difficulties. It's much more expensive to raise a child with severe cerebral palsy that requires equipment and constant therapies and doctor's appointments and specialized everything. And it's really, really expensive, and it's hard. I had a very good career in television for a long time. But I always tell people, like, there's no amount of money that would make me feel like we're set and everything's going to be fine, because you never know what's going to pop up and what's going to happen. Most people, when they're raising typical children, you think, okay, we'll raise them up. They'll go to school. Hopefully they'll go to college, but they'll go out and get a job and whatever. And, at some point they're going to be off and doing their own thing. Like, that's just not the case with Sydney. She'll be with us forever. She'll be our obligation forever. I don't mean that in a negative way at all.
Of course.
She's my best friend in the entire world. I love her so much, and she'll be my roommate for my entire life and hers. But that's just, things when you're planning your family, like, you don't plan on taking care of a child for the rest of your life. And for us, that's the financial piece of it. Then there's the physical piece of it. I'm a big, strong guy. I'm 6'2", 200 pounds. I've lifted weights my entire life. I'm an athlete, all that stuff. My wife, we run together. My wife's run half marathons. She's in very good shape. And
Sydney
our body.
did one with you, right? Didn't Sydney?
Yeah, we have a run. We have the Sydney Strong Run Club.
That's great.
But the reality of it is, carrying her, and this is a common problem in the community with kids like Sydney, is, you're doing transfers, right? From the chair to her bed, from her bed to, her chair, getting her bathed, all stuff like that. it's a lot of carrying, and it hurts, and the body breaks down a little bit. So that's a thing that happens. You got to take care of yourself, and you don't realize that, like, you can't condition your body just to be, I want to look good. No, you have to approach this like an athlete, and caring for your child who's going to be a big person. Sydney's already 45 pounds, and I'm 6'2". So Sydney looks like she's going to be a tall person, which means she's probably going to be big and heavy. And it's going to be on Sam and I to continue to transfer her and care of her and carry her and all that stuff. And that takes a toll on you physically. And then some of the other challenges are, going out, because, our society is in Los Angeles and in the United States, we are very thoughtful, and we think about the people with disabilities, wheelchairs, but the reality of it is, it's not everywhere. I mean, we've gone to a bunch of restaurants where there's no ramps to get in, or people will be like, oh, the elevator is broken today. Sorry. Well, that's not a big deal to you. You can take the stairs. I was in a building once, and there was a fire alarm that went off, and they had everybody evacuate, and the elevator shut down, and they're like, okay, well, you got to get her out. So a fireman carried Sydney down 6 flights of stairs. And then when they cleared us to go back in the building, the elevators still weren't working yet. So I threw her over my shoulder, and we marched up 6 flights of stairs to get her wheelchair back. And then we waited for the elevators to turn back on. So that's a thing that happens too. And there's a lot more than that, but that's just kind of, those are just some of the issues.
It's important to remember, especially as she gets bigger and you're doing all of these physical things, to take care of yourself as well, physically and mentally, and all of the ways, because that's the only way to be, a compassionate caregiver, is if you burn yourself out physically or mentally. It's such a big thing to consider that most people probably don't consider until they have a child with special needs or their parents' age. And that's something that I'm dealing with now, is your parents' age. And it's like, how do you be a compassionate caregiver and remember to take care of yourself? It's interesting to, you and I talked a little bit about with the fires going on in LA, how you had to think so far ahead in evacuating because of all of Sydney's equipment and all.
That's right. So she has 2 different wheelchairs. She has a wheelchair that we take out and she uses in the world. And then she has a wheelchair it's bigger and more comfortable that we use in the house. In addition to that, she has a stander, which keeps her upright because it's good for blood circulation, digestion, stuff like that. She's got a walker, which helps her move her, because she can move her feet, and she can't walk properly like a typical, person her age. But, she uses this, it's assisted walking. She has a customized bike that she uses to pedal. She's got a ton of equipment, and it's all very, very important to her well-being and her blood circulation, her health, her mental well, all that stuff. And is it replaceable? Yes. Will it take forever to replace? Yes. And so once we started seeing, it was getting close and we could see the flames from our home, we decided, you know what, we're not in a position to sit and wait it out. We got to start moving stuff now. We moved all of Sydney's equipment to a friend's home, and then we grabbed Sydney, and we have a special van that is for her wheelchair, and we loaded that up, and then we went and stayed at a friend's home while the threat of the fire was contained, fortunately. After the fires in the Palisades, there were reports that showed that some of the people who unfortunately passed away were people with disabilities that couldn't get out of their homes in time. And so for us, we were just like, we don't have the luxury of being nimble. We have to move now. And so that's what we did.
And to that point, like you said about don't have the luxury of being nimble, or when the elevator goes out that other people don't think about.
Yeah.
Has that impacted your desire to raise awareness for?
Oh my God, yes, absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about
things
that.
you don't recognize, I won't say most people don't, but for me, I'll acknowledge that I was less sensitive to this before Sydney was around.
Mm-hmm.
And things like when people park in a handicap spot, that, and they're just like, oh, I'm just running in, it's for a second. But it's like, you don't understand. That's not for you. And I've gotten into arguments with people about that because it's not safe for us to park our van with Sydney in her wheelchair in a typical spot instead of a handicap spot. And the room for the handicap spot is to accommodate the wheelchair and the equipment and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. We have a ramp in the back of our van that opens up. And, if we're doing that in a regular parking lot, sometimes people don't see the ramp or they don't see Sydney and they drive dangerously close. So you get out and you try to educate people as much as you can. And, some people get it and they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize. And I hope that they're genuine and they try not to do it again. Unfortunately, some people are like, they say not nice things back, and whatever, they're going to have to live with themselves.
So with you kind of helping to educate the community about that, or being, I see a lot of your Instagram posts are tagged with CP Warrior. And can you tell me a little bit about what that means to you and to Sam as well?
Yeah, so Sydney's a fighter. I mean, she is one of the hardest working, most just motivated people I've ever met in my entire life. And like, tell her she can't do something and see what happens. She goes to dance class. She does ballet. She swims. She plays football with in the backyard with us, with her brother and me and Sam and other friends. She refuses to be held back by her diagnosis. She doesn't let that define her. It's something that's in her life and that, we're aware of and that we deal with, but she doesn't let that hold her back from anything. And in my opinion, that makes her a warrior. And, the CP warrior thing is, we want to help other people that, might not be in this kind of state of mind yet. And I'll tell you, like, for me personally, like, it took me a while to get to this point. And it, I started seeing a therapist with some advice from my wife, who suggested I do that. She's in the mental health industry. And it was the best thing I ever did, because there are a lot of things I needed to work out and talk through and get to. And one of the biggest things for me was, I would say the first year, maybe first couple of years, I was really in denial about what the diagnosis was and what it meant. And I was always kind of looking for, when people would be like, well, look, the reality is she's probably not going to be able to, she's probably going to be nonverbal. I'd be like, yeah, but what is the percentage and how do we overcome that and all that stuff? Well, we're always going to keep working to make Sydney the best version of herself physically. But also, once I kind of embraced and accepted the diagnosis and like, this is part of who she is, instead of being in denial about it or being ashamed of it or anything like that, it just made my relationship with her so much better, and it made my life so much better. And it's been great. I accept, like, this is who she is, right? She's nonverbal. It doesn't mean she doesn't have a lot to say. She's not ambulatory. She can't walk. That doesn't mean she doesn't want to go everywhere. And once I started to kind of understand that and accept that and embrace it, it just made me went from like playing defense almost to like playing offense. And now we're looking for stuff to do together all the time. We're looking for new classes, new adventures. We just took a trip to Hawaii together. Like we never traveled with Sydney because we were so afraid of like what the travel would look like and what a hotel would look like. But now it's just like, you know what? We'll figure it out. And we did. And it turned out to be one of the greatest trips we ever went on. We went to the Aulani, the Disney resort in Oahu, and it was fantastic. Shout out to the entire staff there. But, we're doing these things more, and it's been great.
I see how much you guys do. I think you have a more active lifestyle than I do. Yeah. I think Sydney's more active than me in some ways.
She's an animal, man. She gets after it. If you ask her, by the way, one of the things she's most proud of, if you ask her, you say, Sydney, let me see those muscles. She will flex at you, and she will show you how strong she is.
I will remember to ask her that, to have her flex when I meet her.
That's right.
It's interesting to hear it because, when I looked and I saw the hashtag CP Warrior, for some reason, I thought of it even as you and Sam were warriors for advocacy, and I hadn't even thought about Sydney herself as a warrior. You're all really warriors for it.
Well, one of the things that, I wish I had when Sydney was born was I didn't really have a community to go to because, I tell people all the time, like, no one plans to have a child with severe disabilities. It just happens. And then you're in it. There's no preparing. There's no like, oh, let me get hold time out. Let me just get all my ducks in a row and make sure I know what's going on. And then we can come back. No, that doesn't happen. You're in it and it's go time. And when you're in it, you have everybody telling you things like, oh, it's going to be okay. And everything happens for a reason. And you don't want to hear any of that. I'm telling you straight up, like, don't tell that to people. If you're listening to this and you have a friend of somebody who has disability, don't tell them everything happens for a reason, because no one wants to hear that, especially when you're in the middle of it. But what I did want to hear at the time was real practical advice. Do you have any therapists that I should be seeing? What kind of therapy should we even be looking into? What kind of groups should I be joining to meet up with other parents like this? All these kind of things, like, different kind of doctors, different kind of specialists. We met Ali Steers through somebody that has a child like Sydney that we became friends with on social media because somebody said, hey, Sydney's like this person, you guys should connect. And we did. And that person's been like a mentor to us, and it's been amazing, but we didn't meet that person for a couple of years in. So I wish I had that earlier. And what I'm trying to do, the reason that we're so public and open about our lives is because I want to help other people and Sam's, our whole family, we want to be able to give that to other people that might be in the same position that we were in.
That is the perfect segue and sort of kind of half answers the kind of one of my next questions, which was, what are some of the most important resources and support systems that were available to Sydney and to you? And you've mentioned Ali Steers and the DOP system communication pod.
Yeah.
Pod communication system. If there's any resources that off the top of your head you can think of that you're like, you must do these two things.
Sure. Well, I mean, look, the first thing that you should be doing is connecting with your regional center in California. They call it regional center. And they have a lot of resources. The other thing is social media has been so great for us because, I wish there was like a short list of places that I could tell people like, hey, these are the definite places that you need to check out right now. But the reality of it is things are always changing. Different kinds of services, they change. But there are so many families that are so plugged into this that if you just get into the social media community and you meet other families that are like yours, that are like ahead of you in the game, they can guide you along. And the special needs community, I'm telling you, is one of the most amazing communities in the world. I have not met anyone who's really cold-shouldered us at all. Everybody wants to help other people. And when I say, I'm not even generalizing, every single person I've met who's been a part of this community has extended their hand and said, how can I help you along? And I'm telling you, just getting on social media, follow Sydney, Smiling Cindy Strong on Instagram, or me, Evan Rosenblum on Instagram. And then you can start looking at other people we post, other families, or just, search for hashtags with whatever diagnosis and to see other examples, and just become a part of these communities and ask questions and don't be shy.
That's great advice. And it is really important to connect with as many people as you can, because what might work for one family or person might not work for another. So
Exactly.
really the sort of variety of resources and having that at your fingertips with social media and your regional centers are all a really, really good idea. So what, is there anything you would say that the general public could do to be more inclusive and supportive of people with neurodiversity and
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the beautiful things about my daughter's school is that it's an inclusive model. And what that means is that Sydney sits next to typical kids and other kids with disabilities and gifted kids all in the same environment. And they all learn together, and it's representative of like how the real world works, right? Because the way it used to be is they would take kids like Sydney and they put them in a special ed class in the back of the school, and they'd close the door and they wouldn't interact with anybody except for other kids with special needs. And some are verbal and some are nonverbal and some have these things and some of the other things. And it was not a great experience for a lot of people. Today at school, Sydney's wearing a necklace that's a 3-part best friends necklace with 2 other people who are typical kids. And they FaceTime Sydney to make sure, to talk to her at night. They make sure that, on her computer, they make sure that she has the most up-to-date songs all the kids are listening to on her computer so she can DJ at school. I mean, and I don't think she would get that if she was, in a special ed class with a special ed school with just other special ed kids. Mm-hmm. No disrespect to them, but I just think that inclusivity is so important, not only for Sydney, but for everybody else as well, because they get to interact with Sydney. And I still see it when we call it our little bubble, because when we leave our bubble sometimes, when we got into the real world, you see other kids Sydney's age that will stare. And, I don't mind the staring. And here's why, especially from a child, because I feel like they're staring because it's different and they're curious. And the way that I handle that is I will engage the kid and be like, hi, this is Sydney. And then Sydney will be like, hi, and she'll wave because that's who Sydney is. And then if the person starts a conversation like, why is she in a wheelchair? Why can't she talk? Which is things that happen all the time. And it's totally fine. It's a fair question for a child. You answer it. And then, Sydney engages and then they talk. And then that person has a really wonderful experience with a person who appears to be different than them. Mm-hmm. And then maybe that'll make them a little less intimidated to engage a person like that next time. Now for adults, it's a little different. For adults, like people will try to talk to her sometimes, and that's totally fine. Again, they'll say, hey, how are you? She's so cute. And be like, oh, hi, she's not, I'll explain. She's nonverbal, but she understands everything. And then the right way to react to that is talk to her like a person. And once I tell you that she understands, that's your cue to continue to have a conversation, and I'll help translate. But what you don't do is you go up to her when she's sitting there and you go, what's her diagnosis? Or like, what's wrong with her? What does she have? First off, she understands you, so she's going to be offended, right? That's number one. Right. And number two, like, that's just rude. Like, just because she appears different doesn't give you the right to like get, all of her medical information. Like, she doesn't tell you anything. Now, if we're having a conversation and it comes up and you can do it in a polite way, that's totally fine. But to come up, it's happened to us at the park. Where we're at the park and a guy came up to us and was like, what is it, CP? Is it CP? And I'm like, who the bleep are you? Like, who are you? And why are you talking to me? And also, like, just stop. Just stop. I don't try to engage aggressively with people like that. I really try to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I always try to, in my head, be like, okay, their intention is probably good. They need maybe a little bit of like guidance on tact. And I'll try to help them with that. But just know that, like, just because they appear different doesn't mean that they don't understand you and that they don't have feelings and emotions like my daughter absolutely does. So I think that's a big piece of advice. Can I go on a little rant off that too, by the way? Because I want to rant about this because that also brings me into the R word. And I'm really passionate about this because there are a lot of comedians and Elon Musks out there and other people who are using the R word just cavalierly, just throwing it around like it's no big deal. And they don't understand why it's hurtful. And I'm telling you that it is hurtful to the very people that you think it's not hurting. And that is people with intellectual disabilities. Because, for instance, my daughter, who is 9, knows what that word means. She understands it. And that she also understands that when people are using that word as an insult to insult somebody else, like, hey, bro, you're blah, 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 she knows that it's somebody that's weaponizing a condition to attack somebody else. And it makes her feel bad. And people like my daughter shouldn't have to deal with that. And anybody that has an intellectual disability should not be mocked in any way for their disability. And what people don't understand is they go, oh, well, I wasn't directing it at you. I wasn't calling you the R word. I was calling that person the R word. But it's like, right. But what you're doing is you are taking an intellectual disability that somebody like my daughter knows she has and understands that because she acts different or speaks different and whatever appears to be slow or whatever it is, and you're using that, weaponizing it, taking that to attack somebody else. How do you think that makes that person feel? Exactly. I'll tell you how it makes her feel because I live with her every single day. It makes her sad and it breaks her heart. And I wish that more people would appreciate that the next time that they want to use that word.
I think that's really very important and incredibly astute and a really, really vital thing to say because it is a word that's commonly used. Unfortunately, I never get more offended than when someone uses the R word to call somebody else. And I actually had a fight with my cousin about it years ago. He said something just in passing and, his wife had never seen me get so upset. And that's when I started running a book club for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities then. And we ran that for 2 years. And I was really kind of becoming interested and entrenched and enmeshed in a community and learning about a community that I had never been part of before and really feeling, oh my God, no, everyone is exactly like me and I'm exactly like them. And we all kind of belong together. And I remember when I was in school, and you're right, the special ed classes were totally separate. We never interacted. And it led to a feeling of like, who were they? Like, the only time we ever saw each other was in the lunchroom. There was no fostering of any kind of community amongst people with differing levels of abilities, mental, physical, social. And so I think, and that's kind of what brought me on to, working with Welcome Neurodiversity in this podcast, is because I think it's really important to try and get the word out and to ensure that inclusivity is a part of our world, essentially. Right. So I really appreciate you saying that. Last question. What are your hopes and dreams for Sydney's future? It's a big question to close out with, but
I think about this a lot, and I tell people, this is what I tell people when they ask me like what the goals are for Sydney. I want to give her the best life possible. I want her to have a meaningful and good life. And I want to help her do whatever it is that she wants to do. And I know that's it's kind of vague, but I mean that's the truth. She's 9. I mean, nobody really knows what they want to do when they're 9. But right, exactly. As she continues to grow and develop, and we're going to foster her interests. She has this gift, or she brightens every room and she makes people smile. She loves to engage people, and maybe that's her calling, is to go out and work with other people and help people like that. So whatever it is that she wants to do, she has our full support. And, for my wife and I, I was in a job that was insanely demanding until about 5 years ago. I left it, and I've changed my whole career around to give myself more time to be with my kids, especially, with Sydney requiring so much more attention. And that was a big step for me to be able to do that. But my wife and I we both had made massive career changes to accommodate our lives. And I got to tell you, it was very scary. Best thing I ever did in my entire life. And being able to spend more time with her and grow with her and help kind of nurture her interests and all that stuff. It's been the most rewarding thing and the best decision I ever made. And so, right now she's 9, she's getting bigger. It's like, what do they say? The days are long, the years are short. It's true. I can't believe she's 9 years old already. It's unbelievable. But, whatever it is, whatever interest that she decides she wants to follow, we'll continue to support that.
That's so great. I love seeing you guys. You guys are so supportive. She's absolutely adorable. If any of our listeners want to follow her, she is on Instagram at smiling_Sydney, SYDNEY_strong, and Evans at EV Rosenblum, right? ROSENBLUM. So you can
That's
follow
right.
you.
Yep.
Evan, thank you so much for being a part of this today. I'm so
My
glad
pleasure.
that you were here to chat with us. Thank you for everything.
Absolutely. Anything you guys need from me, our live's an open book. Anybody who's listening, need questions, whatever, hit me up. I'm around.
That's awesome. Thanks, Evan.
Thank you, James.